My husband leaned toward his best friend and muttered under his breath, "She's clueless. Tonight's the night." They both chuckled softly, like they were sharing a private joke I wasn't supposed to hear. I was standing by the sink, rinsing the last of the dishes, and every word sliced straight through me. I pretended I hadn't heard a thing. I dried my hands, fixed my face into something calm and pleasant, and carried the dessert plates to the table like I was just any other wife on any other normal night. Except nothing about that night was normal. We were 6 years into our marriage at that point. I was 33, old enough to know that when a man whispers, "Tonight's the night," with that tone of anticipation, it usually doesn't end with flowers and a love letter. Especially not after 8 months of secrecy, late nights, and a phone he guarded like it contained nuclear codes. So I did the only thing I felt I had left. I took control of what I could. I set the tiramisu down in front of them, gave his friend my most polite smile, then walked over to my bag on the counter. My hands were strangely steady, considering that my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I took out a single manila envelope. All those hours at my lawyer's office, all that quiet time at the bank, signing forms with a neutral expression while my insides shook. Half our savings moved to a separate account, all legal, all documented. A proposed separation agreement drafted with calm, clinical language that felt nothing like the storm inside me. I walked back to the table and slid the envelope right in front of my husband's plate. He frowned. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. My voice sounded steady, almost gentle. It didn't match the way my throat was tightening. His best friend's smile faltered, then disappeared altogether. For a second, they both just stared at the envelope like it might explode. He finally opened it, unfolded the papers, and started to read. I watched the color drain from his face. In that moment, I truly believed my entire life was about to collapse because of the one thing every woman dreads most in a marriage: betrayal. What I didn't know yet was that I was wrong about the kind of betrayal that was coming. And that somehow made everything even worse. Before that night with the envelope, before whispers over wine turned my world upside down, our story looked nothing like a tragedy. If anything, it looked painfully ordinary, comfortable, predictable. The kind of marriage people assume will last simply because nothing dramatic ever seems to happen. I was 27 when I met him. A barbecue at a mutual friend's house, the kind where people stand around pretending to care about how the meat is marinated, while secretly wondering if anyone interesting will show up. I wasn't expecting much from the evening. I went because I didn't want to disappoint my friend, not because I believed anything life-changing would happen. Then he walked in. He had that easy confidence that some men possess naturally, not arrogant, just steady. When our eyes met across the yard, I felt something small and warm flutter awake inside me. We ended up talking for hours, not flirting, not performing, just talking. About work, the places we'd traveled, the stupid things our friends had done in college. I remember laughing so much my cheeks hurt. 2 months later, we were inseparable. 6 months after that, we were married. Everyone said we moved too fast. Some whispered it wouldn't last. But we ignored them, wrapped up inside our own sense of certainty. For the first few years, we built a life so synchronized it felt like breathing, buying our first house together, adopting a dog, learning each other's routines. I knew his coffee preference by heart. He knew how to read my moods better than I did. There were rituals, small ones, insignificant to anyone else, that made me believe we were solid. The way he'd rest his hand on the small of my back when we walked into a room together, the way I'd tuck a note into his lunchbox when he had a difficult week ahead, the way we'd fall asleep with our feet touching, because neither of us liked distance in bed. Nothing about our marriage felt fragile back then. But fragility isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's invisible, like hairline cracks under glossy paint. Looking back now, I realize the shift didn't come suddenly. It arrived quietly, almost politely, like someone tapping at the door instead of breaking it down. About 8 months before that dinner, something in him changed. Not drastically. Just enough for me to tilt my head and wonder why things felt off. He laughed at messages on his phone but wouldn't show me. He angled the screen away when I walked by. He dressed nicer for casual hangouts with his best friend than for our date nights. He started wearing a new cologne, the kind he never wore around me. Whenever I asked how his night was, he'd say, "Fine," and change the subject so fast it felt intentional. I told myself not to overthink it. Men get stressed, men get distant, Men go through seasons. And I wasn't the suspicious type. I prided myself on being calm, rational, the kind of wife who didn't snoop or jump to conclusions. But every woman knows the difference between a partner who is simply tired and a partner who is hiding something. I felt him slipping away. And then his best friend, the one he'd known since college, the one he always said understood him better than anyone, kept appearing more often. Weekly dinners, late-night conversations, inside jokes that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. Still, I stayed quiet. I believed communication would return on its own. I believed he would eventually come to me. But cracks don't fix themselves. They spread. They deepen. They wait for pressure. And the pressure came the night I learned exactly how well sound travels in our open-floor kitchen. I found out accidentally that from the right angle at the sink, I could hear conversations on the couch perfectly, while they assumed I was too far away to catch anything. That accidental discovery would become the thread that unraveled everything. Because what I heard next was the beginning of the end. The night of the incident is carved into my memory with painful clarity. Every second, every look, every breath sits heavy in my chest, even now. It was the kind of night where the air feels too still, where your instincts whisper warnings you don't want to acknowledge. From the moment I left work early, I felt like I was moving through water, slow and heavy. I told myself it was just nerves, just overthinking, just the remnants of that overheard conversation replaying in my mind. But deep down I knew. Women always know. I drove straight to my lawyer's office. Sitting in that sterile room, signing paperwork that outlined how we would split our marriage like assets on a balance sheet, felt surreal. I kept my shoulders straight, my voice level, but inside I was shrinking, disappearing, preparing for a betrayal I had convinced myself was inevitable. The envelope he handed me felt heavier than paper should. My second stop was the bank, where I moved half of our joint savings into an account under my name. Legally, transparently, nothing hidden. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't greed, it was survival. A woman who thinks her marriage is collapsing learns very quickly how to protect herself. My third stop was the grocery store. I wandered through aisles, selecting ingredients for a beautiful dinner. Fresh pasta, good wine, the expensive cheese he liked. I don't know whether I was trying to soften the blow, maintain control, or simply keep the illusion alive a little longer. Maybe all three. When I got home, the quiet of the house echoed around me. I changed into a simple dress, tied my hair back, and started cooking. The motion soothed me, kneading dough, chopping herbs, stirring sauces. It was the sort of domestic ritual I used to love, back when I felt cherished, not suspicious. He arrived at 6, surprised to see me home early. "You're home early," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "Wanted to make something special," I replied, my voice soft, my heart hard. "Your friend is still coming, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, she'll be here at 7. "Perfect." I watched the flicker of sadness in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Another sign, another cut. By the time his best friend arrived with a forced smile and a bottle of wine, the table was set like a celebration instead of a battlefield. We ate, we talked. Or rather, they talked, exchanging glances that skated just beneath the surface of normalcy. I felt like a ghost sitting among the living. After dinner, I cleared the plates and brought out the tiramisu I'd spent an hour making. His best friend complimented it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My husband's fingers tightened around his fork. "Actually," I said lightly, "there's something I want to share with you both." Their eyes snapped to me, his in confusion, hers in alarm. I walked to the counter, opened in my bag, and took out the envelope. The room shifted, the air stilled. My heartbeat thundered like it was trying to break out of my ribs. I placed the envelope in front of him. His best friend went very still. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." His hands trembled as he slid out the papers. The moment he recognized the header, legal separation agreement, his face drained of color. What is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said quietly. "A separation agreement. Fair division of assets. Terms for selling the house. Everything clearly outlined." His best friend leaned over, panic creeping into her expression. "Why would you—" I cut her off. "Because I heard you both last week." The silence that followed was suffocating. "I heard everything," I continued, keeping my voice steady with effort. "The guilt, the whispered conversations, the talk about needing to tell me. Tonight's the night, all of it." My husband's eyes widened with horror. "You heard that?" "Every word." He opened his mouth, then closed it. His best friend looked like she wanted to disappear. He swallowed hard. It's not what you think. Then tell me, I said evenly. Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent 8 months acting like a stranger, hiding your phone, dressing up for someone else, disappearing at night, and whispering with your best friend about needing to rip the Band-Aid off. The logical conclusion isn't exactly complicated. He covered his face with his hands. Oh, God. Tears welled in my eyes, despite my best efforts to remain composed. I hated giving him the power to see me hurt, but the truth was, I was hurt. Deeply. Bone deep. Finally, he spoke. It's a job offer, he whispered. I blinked. A what? A job offer, he repeated, voice cracking. In another state. A huge opportunity. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. A job, not an affair, not another woman. A job. His best friend rushed in with her explanation, her voice soft but firm. We were talking about him telling you, not cheating, not anything like that. My husband looked at me with eyes that were both pleading and ashamed. I wasn't cheating, he said. I swear, I was just scared to tell you. I glanced at the separation papers sitting between us, like a physical manifestation of every fear I'd let grow inside me. The betrayal I prepared for wasn't the one I received, and somehow the truth cut even deeper. For a moment after he said the words, "It's a job offer," I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. My entire body seemed to freeze in place while my mind scrambled to reconcile 8 months of fear with the truth sitting in front of me. A job offer, all this time. A job? He wasn't having an affair. He wasn't sneaking around with another woman. He was hiding a life-changing opportunity from me for 2 entire months. Somehow that betrayal felt colder. I sat there staring at him, the separation agreement lying open on the table like a wound I'd carved myself. I felt foolish, relieved, furious, heartbroken, all at once, all clashing against each other like waves in a storm. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "Because I knew you wouldn't want to move. Your family is here, your job is here, our life is here. I didn't know how to ask you to consider leaving all that." "So you hid it," I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort, "for months, while I walked around feeling like my marriage was evaporating." He looked down at his hands like he couldn't face me. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Intentions didn't matter. Impact did." His best friend sat rigid on the couch, her knees pulled together, hands clasped tightly, so unlike her usual carefree confidence. She looked anywhere but at me. Guilt radiated off her like heat. I rubbed my temples, feeling the exhaustion crash through me. "You kept saying you felt guilty. What was that supposed to mean?" He swallowed. "I felt guilty for wanting something that might take me away from you." The words slid under my skin like ice. "So instead of talking to me, your wife, you talked to her." My tone wasn't accusatory. It was just tired. "You told her everything. You let her comfort you. You let her guide you, and you shut me out." He winced. "It wasn't like that," he said softly. "It was like that," I corrected. "I watched you confide in her more than you have in me for months." Silence fell again, thick and suffocating. He glanced at the envelope. "You really thought I was cheating." "What was I supposed to think?" I shot back. The secrecy, the late nights, the whispers, the glances, the guilt, the fact that every time I approached you, you pushed me away. He flinched again, and for the first time in months, he didn't try to deflect. He didn't tell me I was imagining things. He didn't minimize my feelings. He just sat there, broken, ashamed, and I didn't know what to do with that. I stood up and started clearing the dessert plates again, not because they needed cleaning, but because I needed something to hold on to. Something to keep my hands busy while my heart staggered under the weight of everything. His best friend finally spoke. "I should go." "No," I said quietly. "You were part of this. You can stay." She blinked and nodded slowly, reluctantly. He took a deep breath. "I got the offer 2 months ago. They gave me until the end of this month to decide." "That's next week," I said, stunned. "I know. And you thought waiting until the last moment would, what, make it easier?" "No," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to have the conversation without hurting you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Well, congratulations. You managed to hurt me worse." He lowered his head. I sat across from him again, folding my hands in front of me. "Do you want the job?" His voice cracked. "I don't know. Part of me does. It's my dream job. But part of me doesn't want to leave you, doesn't want to leave our home, our life. I'm torn." "If you were truly torn," I said gently but firmly, "you would have come to me the moment you got the offer. We would have discussed it like partners." He had no answer. In that silence, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not in a screaming, fiery way. It was a quieter anger, a deep ache that settled into the hollow of my chest, a realization that trust doesn't always shatter with a loud crash. Sometimes it dissolves quietly, like sand slipping between your fingers, until you look down and realize there's nothing left to hold. His best friend excused herself to the bathroom, clearly needing to escape the emotional gravity in the room. When she returned, her face was pale. My husband looked at me with red eyes. I never wanted this. I know, I said softly, but hiding something like that, it changes things. He nodded, defeated. That night, we stayed up until nearly 3 in the morning, talking in circles, apologizing, realizing the damage wasn't caused by the job offer, but by the silence that grew around it. By the time we crawled into bed, nothing was resolved. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing beside me, feeling like we were miles apart while lying inches away. Something fundamental had cracked, and I didn't know if we could ever mend it. The morning after our impossible conversation, I woke to an empty house. His side of the bed was cold, the sheets undisturbed. A folded note sat on his pillow, neat handwriting, like he had taken time to make it look gentle even though everything about it felt harsh. I need time to think. I'm staying at her place for a few days. Her place, his best friend's place. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with a strange, hollow ache. It wasn't about her. It was about what it meant that he chose her space over ours, over me, over home. I texted him, "Take the time you need. Let me know if you need anything." Simple, neutral. I had no strength left for anything else. The next 3 days were a blur of silence and logistics. He texted only about our dog, or bills, or some mundane detail that didn't require acknowledging the emotional earthquake between us. And every hour that passed, the crack between us deepened. I tried to distract myself, work, chores, anything. But the house echoed with the absence of conversation, laughter, the familiar rhythm of us. Even the dog seemed confused, wandering from room to room as if searching for something missing. On the 4th day, he finally called. His voice was steady, almost too steady. "I'm taking the job." No build-up, no apology, no discussion. "Okay," I said. My voice didn't shake, but everything inside me did. "That's all you're going to say?" he asked. "Just okay?" "What do you want me to say?" I replied softly. "Congratulations? Don't go? I'm proud of you, but destroyed? Pick one." Silence stretched between us. Then he whispered, "I wanted you to fight for us." I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. "I would have fought for us if you'd told me when it mattered. 2 months ago. Back when we still had time to talk things through. But now? Now it feels like you're giving me a test I never signed up for." Another silence, this one heavier. He breathed shakily. "So this is it. We're done." I stared at the wall, my fingers trembling. "I think we've been drifting toward this for a while. We just didn't see it clearly until now." He whispered something that broke me and healed me at the same time. "I love you." "I know," I replied, "but love doesn't fix what secrecy destroys." The call ended with quiet resignation. No yelling, no theatrics, just 2 people letting go of something they never imagined would fall apart. We agreed to separate amicably. He would move for the job in 6 weeks. We would sell the house and divide everything fairly. When I hung up, I cried for the first time since this began. Not loud sobs, just a quiet, persistent unraveling, like threads coming loose from the edges of a tapestry I had spent years weaving. Family and friends step in. The moment word spread, through subtle clues, missed gatherings, and unreturned text, our families dove into the situation. Not with support, but with questions, accusations, opinions they didn't fully understand. My family asked the obvious, what happened? Was there someone else? Did you two fall out of love? I had no real answers. His family, on the other hand, leaned on him with pressure disguised as concern. How could you throw away your marriage? Are you sure this job is worth it? Why didn't you talk to her sooner? His mother called me once. Her voice trembled. I never wanted to lose you, she said. I always thought you two were perfect. That sentence nearly broke me. Because perfection doesn't exist, but the illusion of it does, and we had lived inside that illusion far too long. The best friend's shadow. Throughout all of this, his best friend hovered like a ghost at the edge of the story. She sent a short text. I'm sorry everything happened this way. I stared at that message for a long time before replying. Me too. I didn't blame her for his choices, but I couldn't ignore her role, the confidant he chose instead of me, the voice that nudged him. the presence he sought when he should have sought his wife. She avoided me in public, avoided eye contact, avoided any situation where she might have to acknowledge the fracture she helped shape, even if unintentionally. The escalation of truth. In the weeks that followed, our conversations were measured, careful, almost businesslike. We discussed furniture, real estate listings, timelines, the dog's vet schedule. Our marriage had become a series of tasks. But every now and then, emotion flared. One night, he came to the house to pick up a few things. We stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I first overheard them, and tension filled the air like static. "You think I didn't choose you?" he said suddenly. "You didn't give me a chance to be chosen," I replied. He winced. "That's not fair." "It's fair," I said gently. "You got the offer and built the entire emotional world around it without me. You made decisions without me. You walked through fear without me. You confided in someone else about something that affected both of us. You chose silence over partnership." His eyes reddened. I didn't know how to talk about it. "You didn't try." He shut his eyes, pain flickering across his face. That was the escalation. The realization that even now, even while dismantling our marriage, he couldn't fully acknowledge what went wrong. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to face the truth. Love had never been our problem. Communication had. And communication is the root of everything. The internal shift. During those escalating weeks, something in me changed. Not overnight, but steadily. I stopped hoping he would say he made a mistake. I stopped waiting for him to ask me to come with him. I stopped fantasizing about him turning around and choosing us. Instead, I began choosing myself. I started going on walks alone. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed aside. I made plans. Not we plans, but me plans. For the first time in months, I felt ownership over my life again. But strength is not the absence of pain. Strength is carrying the pain without letting it become your identity. And I carried it every day, every night, waiting for the final unraveling. There comes a moment in every unraveling, quiet, cruel, unmistakable, when you stop hoping the pieces will fit back together. When you recognize that the person you love is no longer walking beside you, even if they're still standing in the same room. My moment came 2 weeks before the move. The house was half packed, half home. Cardboard boxes stacked against walls, still decorated with our wedding photos. It created a surreal contrast, like watching a life be dismantled while the memories stubbornly clung to the walls. He came by that night to pick up more of his things. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound that once brought comfort. Now it felt like an intrusion. "Hey," he said softly when he walked in. "Hey," I replied, folding a blanket into a box. My voice felt thin. We moved around each other like strangers forced into politeness. Silences filled the space between us. Heavy, aching silences that used to be filled with laughter, ordinary chatter, even playful arguments. At one point, he paused and picked up a framed photo from the hallway shelf. It was from our second anniversary. We were standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean, my arms wrapped around him, our smiles effortless. He stared at it for a long time. "Do you ever think about that trip?" he asked. The question pierced me. "Of course I do." "We were happy," he murmured. "We were," I agreed. He set the frame down carefully, like it might break if he handled it any other way. That's when the ache inside my chest became something else, something deeper, darker. Not anger, not betrayal, something like mourning. I realized, standing there in the hallway, watching him avoid my eyes, that we were grieving the same thing, but from different distances. He was grieving the memory. I was grieving the future we had lost. After he left that night, the silence in the house became unbearable. It was different from before, no longer the silence of waiting, but the silence of something already gone. I sat on the couch where he once whispered to his best friend about guilt and the right moment. The air felt cold even though the thermostat said otherwise. My hands shook as I hugged my knees, trying to hold myself together. I replayed everything in my mind. The late-night texts, the distanced laughter, the angled phone, the new cologne, the whispered conversation, the separation papers, the job offer, the call where he said he wanted me to fight for us. It all swirled into one truth. He had already left me emotionally long before he said the words out loud. And the darkest part? I had already begun leaving him too, quietly, painfully, without realizing it. People think heartbreak is loud, screaming, crying, throwing things. Sometimes it is, but not for me. Mine was quiet. When friends asked how I was doing, I forced a smile and said, managing. They sensed something deeper, but didn't push. What do you say to someone whose marriage is dissolving not because of infidelity or abuse or a dramatic betrayal, but because of silence? Because two people stopped being brave enough to speak? The best friend, his best friend, stayed away completely. She didn't visit, she didn't call, she didn't text again. Her absence was its own confession, though not a malicious one. More like someone who didn't know how to exist inside the damage. 2 nights after that hallway moment, I hit my breaking point. I found one of his sweatshirts in the laundry basket, a navy one he wore constantly. I lifted it, brought it to my face, and inhaled instinctively. His scent was still there, familiar, intimate, comforting. My knees buckled. I sank onto the floor, gripping the sweatshirt like a lifeline, and I cried. Not graceful tears, not quiet ones. The raw kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, from wounds you didn't realize were still open. I cried for the girl I used to be, for the marriage I fought to protect, for the life we built, for the trust that cracked, for the conversations we never had, for the choices he made without me, for the choices I made trying to protect myself, for the separation agreement lying in a drawer like a shadow of everything that once felt certain. It wasn't about the job. It wasn't even about him leaving. It was about the fact that we never truly tried, not together. We survived on assumptions, on "I thought you knew," on emotional shortcuts that eventually left us both stranded. That night, on the cold floor, clutching a sweatshirt that no longer belonged to me, I understood something agonizing and liberating all at once. Our marriage didn't end because of the job. It ended because, somewhere along the way, we stopped choosing each other. By the time I pulled myself off the floor, exhausted and hollow, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires energy, and I had none left. I was grieving, purely, completely. And grief has a way of carving space for clarity. For the first time, I understood that the future, whatever it was, would not include him beside me, and I would have to learn to live with that. This was my dark moment, the point where the version of me that fought for us finally let go, and the woman who remained would have to decide what came next. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks or a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, the way most truths do, slipping in through the cracks of my exhaustion until I could no longer ignore it. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by open boxes and half-wrapped memories. The house looked like a museum of our life being dismantled piece by piece. Wedding gifts, souvenirs, photos of vacations, all the artifacts of a marriage that once felt permanent. I picked up the separation agreement, the same one I'd placed in front of him that night. The sharp legal language stared back at me. Objective, unemotional, brutally clear. As I read the lines again, I realized something that shook me. The separation papers weren't the end of us. The secrecy was. I had spent months blaming myself for assuming the worst, for preparing to protect myself, for misinterpreting the signs. But as I sat there holding that document, the truth crystallized. He didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, and I didn't trust him enough to ask. That was when the shift began. Not anger, not bitterness. Just clarity. A quiet understanding that we had reached this point because we both failed to communicate, and neither of us was strong enough to face the consequences until it was too late. 2 days later, he came by to pick up the last of his boxes. The air between us felt calmer somehow, as if we had cried out all the anger and were now standing among the ashes of what used to be. He set a box down on the floor. "There's not much left." "No," I said softly. "There isn't." He hesitated, then leaned against the counter. "I've been thinking about everything, about how this happened." "So have I." He took a breath. "I should have told you the moment I got the job offer. I was a coward." "You were scared," I corrected. "And I was scared too." He looked at me, surprised. "You were?" I nodded. "When I overheard you that night, all I could think was that I wasn't enough anymore, that something had changed and I didn't know how to reach you." He winced. "I never wanted you to feel that." "But I did," I said gently. "And you felt things you didn't tell me either." Somewhere along the way, we started having conversations with ourselves instead of with each other. He looked down. "Yeah, we did." For the first time in months, we were honest. Not about blame, not about saving the marriage, just honest about our failings, our silence, our shared responsibility for the distance that grew between us. And then he said something I didn't expect. "I wish we had talked like this sooner." "So do I." We stood there for a few seconds in that rare, painful clarity. Two people who loved each other, but who let fear shape their choices until love wasn't enough. Later that night, after he left, I sat alone on the couch. The house felt different, not empty, but open, like space had finally been made for something new, even if I didn't know what that was yet. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt present, myself, grounded in the truth rather than the fear. I realized that for months, maybe longer, I had been shrinking, compressing parts of myself to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to hold on to something that was already slipping. But the silence between us didn't start 8 months ago. It started long before that, in small ways, quiet ways, unnoticed ways. It took this break, this heartbreak, for me to finally see it. 2 days after packing the last box, his mother called me again. She spoke softly, not with pressure this time, but with honesty. "I know my son," she said. "He gets overwhelmed and retreats. He doesn't handle big emotions well. But he loved you, still loves you probably. That job just became bigger than he knew how to handle." I listened quietly. "And you," she continued, "you always tried to be strong, maybe too strong. You thought protecting yourself meant not asking questions. That strength is admirable, but it also built walls." Her words weren't judgment, they were truth. A mirror held up gently but clearly. "I'm sorry it happened in this way," she added, "but maybe this will help you both grow." Her voice didn't try to convince me to go back or fix things. Instead, she offered something rarer, perspective without agenda. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't broken, I was becoming. By the end of the week, I made my choice. I wasn't going to beg him to stay, I wasn't going to chase him, I wasn't going to hold on to something that had already transformed into something unrecognizable. I was going to let him go, with grace, with honesty, with the love that still lived in me, but no longer blinded me. Letting go wasn't surrender, it was the first step toward reclaiming myself. This was my turning point. Not a moment of triumph, but a moment of truth. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet, like the world had shifted into a lower volume. My marriage was ending, not abruptly, not violently, but with a slow, inevitable exhale. He moved across the country 2 weeks after our final conversation. 14 days. That was all the time left for us to dismantle 6 years of life together. The house sold faster than either of us expected. The realtor called the morning after the listing went up, saying there were already multiple offers. It felt surreal, watching strangers walk through our home, complimenting the natural light and the open kitchen, oblivious to the emotional wreckage soaked into the walls. He and I spent those 2 weeks sorting through everything we owned. Who bought the couch? Who picked out the dishes? Who cared more about the bookshelf we assembled at midnight on our first anniversary? Dividing a home is easy. Dividing a life is not. Still, we did it gently. No shouting, no accusations, no bitterness, just resignation. Every night, I felt the weight of something ending. Every morning, I woke up to the reality that I was one day closer to letting go. The day he packed the final boxes into his car, the atmosphere was thick with everything we weren't saying. His best friend came to help. She hovered by the doorway, quiet and small, nothing like the confident woman she usually was. She couldn't meet my eyes. He closed the trunk and turned toward me. "Thank you for helping with everything." I forced a small smile. "Of course." We stood there awkwardly, two people who used to know every inch of each other's hearts, suddenly unsure where to put their hands. His best friend murmured, "I'll wait in the car," and left us alone. He took a breath. "I'm sorry for everything, for how I handled it." "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry too, for assuming the worst without asking. We both made mistakes." He nodded, eyes glossy. "Do you think if things had gone differently?" "No," I whispered gently. "I think this was always going to break eventually. We just didn't see the cracks." He swallowed hard. "I want you to be happy. I want that for you too." He hugged me then, a soft, lingering embrace that held every goodbye we didn't know how to articulate. When he let go, there was a slight tremble in his hands. He walked to the car. His best friend finally looked at me through the window. Her eyes were full of remorse. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Then they drove away. And just like that, I was alone again. 2 weeks later, after he settled into his new city, I saw a photo he posted, standing in front of his new office building, smiling wide, full of excitement and purpose. A caption about new beginnings, hundreds of likes, comments cheering him on. I shouldn't have looked, but I did, and it hit like a punch to the chest. Not because he was happy, but because he looked so free, so untouched by the emotional wreckage that still lingered inside me. It was painful and strangely comforting. He wasn't suffering, he wasn't drowning. He was moving, living, becoming someone new. And maybe, eventually, I would too. His family reached out to me in the weeks after he left, but as time went on, their messages became less frequent. Not out of cruelty, but because they didn't know where I belonged anymore. I wasn't their daughter-in-law. I wasn't their responsibility. I wasn't part of his story going forward. One day, his mother left a voicemail. I want you to know I never blamed you, and I hope you'll find peace. You deserved honesty and partnership. I'm sorry my son couldn't give you that. I sat on my bed and cried quietly, not out of sadness, but out of release. One evening, I got a text from her, his best friend. I feel responsible for how everything happened. I should have pushed him to tell you sooner. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Was she responsible? No, this wasn't her marriage. But she had been the person he confided in when he should have come to me. Whether she meant to or not, she played a role in the silence that hollowed out our relationship. Still, I replied, it's not your fault. We all handled things badly, but thank you. It was the truth. People assume the worst part of a separation is the moment it happens. The decision, the confrontation, the goodbye. But they're wrong. The worst part is the realization that it might have been avoidable, that a single conversation, one brave moment, might have changed everything. If he had told me about the job immediately, we might have explored it together. Maybe we could have compromised. Maybe I would have surprised both of us and agreed to move. Maybe we would have tried long distance and failed anyway, or maybe we would have realized sooner that things were already broken. But at least we would have tried as a team. Instead, I spent months preparing for one kind of betrayal only to be blindsided by another. Trust doesn't always shatter with infidelity. Sometimes it cracks under the weight of silence, and once it cracks, the shape of the relationship changes forever. That was the real fallout, not the separation, not the move, not the loss of our home. It was the understanding that the version of us that once existed had died long before we admitted it. 3 months after he left, life settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. Not peaceful yet, but still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, not because everything is healed, but because the winds have finally stopped tearing through your world. I moved into a smaller place, nothing fancy, just mine. A space without echoes of whispered conversations, without the ghost of a marriage unraveling at the seams. I filled it slowly, one plant, one candle, one new habit at a time. For the first time in years, I cooked dinner for myself without wondering when he'd come home. For the first time in years, I went to sleep without waiting for the sound of a key in the door. For the first time in years, I woke up feeling like the day belonged entirely to me. Grief didn't disappear, it softened. Some mornings it sat beside me like an old companion. Other mornings, I barely felt it at all. Healing isn't linear. That's something no one warns you about. Some days you move forward. Some days you slip back. But slowly, gently, you begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you didn't realize you'd lost. Friends invited me out again. I laughed again, really laughed. The kind that lifts your shoulders and loosens your chest. I remembered what it felt like to enjoy my own company. And in those small moments between the quiet healing and the rebuilding, I found something I didn't expect. Gratitude. Not for the pain, not for the heartbreak, but for the clarity. I realized I had spent so much time trying to hold our marriage together that I forgot to ask whether it still held me, whether I still recognized the woman inside it, whether I felt seen, heard, understood. Losing him forced me to find myself. And here's the lesson I want to leave behind. Not just for myself, but for anyone listening. Love is not enough when honesty is missing. Silence can be as damaging as betrayal, and the person you must not lose in any relationship is yourself. He is thriving in his new life now, and so am I, quietly, steadily, truthfully. We didn't get the ending I once prayed for, but we got the ending we needed. Because some stories break so you can write new ones, and some losses happen so you can finally come home to yourself.